What's up, everybody? Krim here for Sleepers for the Week, and today I want to talk to you guys about a game that I wasn't expecting that I would like as much as I did. Today I want to talk to you guys about Final Fantasy VII Remake. Oh my god! That was so good! That was so good! Now, growing up, I never played the original Final Fantasies on like the NES or the Super Nintendo. My first experience with Final Fantasy was Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation 1. I got a PlayStation 1 around when PlayStation 2 had already come out. A friend of mine actually handed me down his PlayStation 1 because he got a PS2. I had a GameCube. I never really had the ability to get consoles as they came out. But he gave me his PS1 and I immediately went to EB Games and looked for games to play on it. I was really big into RPGs at the time, and I called one of my other friends who liked playing RPGs as well and asked him what is the best game to get to start out for playing on PS1. And at the time, like, he didn't even really remember which Final Fantasy it was, but he essentially told me, get the one with the guy with the blonde spiky hair and the one with the dude with the gun on his arm. And I went to AB Games and told them what I was looking for, and they immediately said, yeah, you want 7. So I picked up 7 as a greatest hits for $14.99, brand new off the shelf, and I went home and played it, and I got completely sucked into this world. And I absolutely loved it. This is one of the only Final Fantasy games I've played multiple times. It's also the one that holds near and dear to my heart, probably because there's nostalgia. You know, everybody has that first game in the series they pick up that they fall in love with.
You better be worth the money, Merc. Every last gil.
Oh, I'm worth it. I'm worth it. I do flips and shit. I've got a sword that's pretty much the size of my own body. Oh, here it is. Iconic scene. Iconic scene.
It's really hard to top that one. I played 8 a little bit, didn't really get into it. I played 9, I liked 9, and I played 10, and I really enjoyed 10. It wasn't until about Final Fantasy 12 that I started to get a little burnt out and didn't like the direction they were trying to evolve Final Fantasy. But Final Fantasy 7 has always stayed very close in my heart, and I've loved being able to play it on multiple different types of consoles as it's been ported multiple times since then. And the rumors of a 7 remake were always around and always getting us hyped up, and we thought we'd never see the day that we'd actually get it. And I have to say, first impressions, extremely satisfying and pretty much on par with what I hoped that it would be. Nothing in the game really made me go, wow, this is really lackluster, or wow, this is really poorly done. Like, I hadn't enjoyed playing a Square Enix title since probably Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy X was probably the last Square Enix title I actually enjoyed. So for me to sit down and be able to play this game and get hooked into it and play it all the way through is saying something, because up until recently I had never wanted to play anything that had Square Enix on the title, to be honest. I'd gotten burnt out with what they were trying to do. I felt like they were coming out with mediocre things. They were trying to evolve things with 15, but never really fully got there. I think that 7 Remake has a amazing combat system. It's something that's fun, it's interactive, it's different, because obviously Square Enix wanted to evolve Final Fantasy. They wanted to get away from the turn-based combat, and in a way they found a way to make a good middle ground here. And I feel like they've been trying to do that ever since Final Fantasy 13. They've been trying to find like a hybrid of like action gameplay and turn-based gameplay to try to keep both parties entertained. And for me, being a big Persona 5 fan and still liking turn-based games, this was very fun. The way they did the combat was very fun in this game. The way they did the summons and incorporated the summons was also extremely fun. The ATB gauge, it was perfect for blending that whole action. Then when you got your gauges build up, pause, and then being able to select certain spells or cure or summons, it was just great. I loved the combat, and that was the one thing I was worried about, was the combat. I was very worried that they weren't going to be able to nail the combat, and that was what was going to like slug the game.
Yeah. It's staggered! Fuck it up! Woo! Let's go!
Never again.
Yeah! Can't take the pressure. Alright.
You're good at this.
Well, we're gonna get Ifrit because this bad boy's weak to fire. Fuck him up.
Calling fire. Going in.
Oh, it's staggered. Get staggered, bitch.
And I know a lot of you are probably wondering, well, how's the story? How's the story compared to the original 7? And most of you probably already know and are aware that this is not going to be the whole entire game of 7. And I know a lot of people were butthurt over that. I was a little butthurt at first when I heard that, you know, they were going to do this in parts and they were going to make it episodic. And I was very worried at how they were going to make this episodic. Like, am I going to only get like a 10-15 hour game and then I've just got to wait for parts to come out? No, this I feel like what they're doing is good. I was very worried about this part, and I know that some people still don't like it about this, but I, in fact, love this about it. It takes the first 4 to 5 hours, the whole Midgar section of Final Fantasy VII, which is, you know, like the first only 4 to 5 hours of the game, and it stretches it into like a 50-hour game. Now, I know that there's some people that have been like, oh, I beat this game in 25 hours, and I beat this game so quickly, blah, blah, blah. That's good for them. I like to take my time with games. You may beat it quicker than I did. I like to take my time and explore and do all side quests. I don't like to platinum games. I'm not 100% completionist, but I like to get my fair fill of a game. And if there's stuff there to enjoy, to do, I will go do those things. And the storyline just had me hooked, as well as knowing the typical story beats of how 7 goes. They nailed it. They absolutely nailed it. All these parts that came up that I remember from the story just sent a wave of nostalgia over me, and I loved it. And maybe that's why some people may not like it, because maybe they're not familiar with the original story. So some people may find the story a little odd. And to be fair, the story of 7 is pretty odd. It's not. It's very it's very high fantasy. You know, mixing a lot of, you know, science fiction with fantasy elements. I love it though. I love this blend, and I think it makes it unique because I feel like games today, even based in fantasy and science fiction, they have to make it some sort of gritty realism.
Oh. What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck?
Music. Okay. Huh. Probably one of the best things about this game is the music. I have to say that Final Fantasy has always been pretty top notch with their OSTs, and 7 is no different. And Final Fantasy 7 is probably one of my favorite OSTs out of all the Final Fantasy games. Like I said, it's still my favorite of the original Final Fantasies, so I'm a little biased in that aspect. But there are some people who have never played Final Fantasy VII. I enjoyed watching people stream this game because when they got to like certain tracks and certain background music, they would go, wow, the music is so beautiful in this game. And I'm like, I know, right? It's such a good updated version of these original classic tracks that several times in my gameplay, I was just stopping to listen to the music. I couldn't help myself. I really couldn't help myself. That and the fact the game looks freaking gorgeous. So on top of being able to sit back and listen to the music, you know, I took in the sights a little bit too. And I think that's what added to some of the length of my gameplay. So the graphics. How are the graphics? Well, pretty much from everything I saw, I absolutely loved. I loved the graphics in it. There were some instances where I was running between areas where sometimes some textures had to catch up a little bit. So there was and I was playing this on a PlayStation 4 Slim. I wasn't playing on a Pro, so that could be slightly a bit to do with it too, possibly. But there were some textures that would kind of clip in and out depending on how fast you went into a new area. There was one thing that I did catch that I had to call Square out for, which was the JPEG backgrounds.
I'm not saying they had to animate all of that city out there in the distance. Flat Earth confirmed. All I'm saying is that you can stack JPEGs, okay? There's no way I'm going to be able to go around in the area enough to be able to see in between the stacked images. But you can give it some depth. Come on. You could have gave that some depth. Although I will say this, that, you know, if I wanted to give it a positive, I would say it kind of reminds you of the PS1 when they would pre-render the background and the background would be kind of flat, but it was okay because it looked photorealistic, and you didn't think nothing of it because it's a top-down view, right?
I mean, there was just times where I was so into the story and the sounds of the game, and I wanted to look at some of the areas and the big open areas in front of me, and sometimes they just looked like a Fishbowl Islands JPEG, which came off very... I don't know if that was just for time's sake. I don't know if they just thought that people wouldn't notice, or if they were trying to go for that old school vibe of how Final Fantasy VII's original backgrounds were just pre-rendered still images of things that, you know, didn't move or interact. I don't know. In some instances they looked okay. In some instances they looked really, really bad. But that's being very nitpicky. Most everything else that is up close and personal with you, that you interact with, that you're going through the different areas and sections, are very, very well rendered. There was just some areas where I just was like, yo, this water texture, this brick texture, everything just looks really, really, really fucking good.
Yo, you see them textures though? You see these textures? Particle effects on point. No shit. That really is what makes this shit awesome, dude. Like I know the PS4 is capable of doing a lot too, but really all a lot of this needed was good like lighting and texture effects. That's it.
So all in all, for this Final Fantasy VII Remake, I dived in and I didn't know what to expect from it. I didn't have too many high expectations for this game because I really didn't know what Square was going to bring us. I didn't know how much they were going to change. I didn't know how much they were going to stick to the original content. So I went into it with a fairly open mind and not too much hype, because if you go into a game with too much hype, you're going to be disappointed regardless. So with that being said, I started to play this, and everything from the story to the way the graphics looked, to the combat, to the gameplay, how you're able to use your summons, how you're able to change your weapons, and it changed in certain cutscenes. Like certain cutscenes you could tell they made with the specific standard equipment and weapons, but for most of the cutscenes you could tell and see, like Cloud had a different sword, the sword that you equipped him with. Each weapon comes with more SP to be able to dump into it and upgrade that weapon. And it doesn't have to be shared across all your weapons. It's great. Each weapon has its own upgrade points, and each weapon has its own abilities and stuff that you can unlock. On top of that, like, not only do you see that change in the cutscenes, but there are certain parts of the game where the storyline is pretty linear. It's pretty much leading you in the same direction. There's not much as far as, you know, changing a lot of things going on, but there are certain things where, depending on how you interact and talk with certain characters, will trigger either certain small events or change the outfits of some people in the game. So not as to spoil, but there are certain sections where you have to answer something a certain way, or you have to do this many side quests to unlock a specific costume or essentially a specific costume that someone's going to be wearing, or outfit someone's going to be wearing in a specific scene down the road. And this is the best thing about this game, is it has essentially a new game plus, where when you finish the game, you can actually go back and replay chapters, and you can also replay them on hard mode. I've not played it on hard mode. I didn't really care to play it on hard mode, but there were some side quests that I actually missed that showed that I failed because I didn't catch them or I didn't know who to talk to, and they show up after you beat the game, and you can go back and replay those sections. You can also go back and replay those sections once you figure out which of those sections require you to answer or do certain things to have different outcomes happen in certain cutscenes. It doesn't really change much of the narrative, it doesn't really change much of the story, but it's neat seeing these very small details that are unique to where when I was playing through my game, I got specific like looks of a costume or looks of an outfit, and then I watched someone streaming it, and their stream, they had someone that had completely different outfit than I had, and I was like, wait, that can change? I didn't know that could change. And it's very minute. It's a very small thing. It doesn't hinder or take away from the gameplay at all. But it's very unique that they went through the trouble to add these little teeny details to make the replayability fun. On top of all of that, with the soundtrack being phenomenal, with the story being so fun, and actually having a good length as well, I was very worried this game was going to be done in like 10 hours, 15 hours. They said episodic. I was very worried that meant that we were going to get like, 15 hours, 15 hours, 15 hours, 15 hours. It's going to be like 25 parts of something, like a Telltale game or something. No, it's not like that at all. I clocked in at 56 hours. When I was done with the whole game, I clocked in at 56 hours. And I felt like that was decent enough for this part of the game, this chunk of the original game. I can't wait to see where they take it after this. And honestly, I'm going to give you my honest opinion. Besides those little nitpicks, there are some things with the combat, with the gameplay, where sometimes the lock-on system can be a little annoying. I wish the lock-on system was a little bit better. I did find that the game doesn't really require you to level grind at all. I noticed that was interesting. I tried to go back through some areas to fight monsters over and over again to gain levels, but a lot of the sections felt empty once you beat a lot of the enemies and you went back to try to go back through and fight the enemies over again, because that's typical for me in a JRPG or an RPG. As soon as I have cleared a section and I know a boss is coming up, I like to go back through and just level grind a bit, do some battles, some small battles with things I've been fighting before, so I get to the point where battling those smaller enemies become easy. Then I feel more comfortable jumping into the boss battle. Well, going back and looking for enemies to fight, they don't spawn a lot. Now, here's my only thing, is that I don't want this critique to lead to Square going, let's just put tons of battles in. No, I liked not having like battles around every corner. I did like that. But I would like, for instance, in sections where you're going in between towns where you know that this area had monsters in it. You beat all those monsters and then they spawn again. They respawn in like 2 or 3 spots in that area instead of being through the whole area again. And I wish it was the whole area in between those spots, because I would love to go back through and level grind, beat up some enemies, get my level up to a high number to where I felt good going into a boss battle. But the boss battles weren't really that bad either. The boss battles can be done, and sometimes the boss can kick your ass, but you can restart that battle right at the beginning of the battle once you get the boss's pattern down or figure out their weakness. Or maybe it was just because you just weren't guarding good enough. It's lots of different things of why a boss could kick your ass. Especially Hell House. Fuck Hell House, by the way. I had the worst time with that one boss. Out of all the bosses, even the last boss, I had the worst time with Hell House. But outside of that, that was my own fault. I wasn't paying attention to the weaknesses or assessing the boss. Do that. Little hint, if you play the game, you get to Hell House, assess the boss, figure out its weaknesses. It'll help you a lot. It'll probably cut 2 days of trying to figure that out of your gameplay. But there's a lot of where I wish it still had that old school vibe of being able to go level grind and get really OP before going into a battle. But I just didn't feel that in this game. I feel like the game was also trying to cater to people who also don't play RPGs. With that being said, I think that's what makes this great, because typically when games don't cater to people who play RPGs and they try to really water it down, it's severely watered down to where none of it's fun. To where even if you are a person that plays RPGs, you find it boring. I didn't find this game boring at all. I kept getting a little worried when I kept getting to boss areas and being like, I really hope I got a good level for this. I hope I'm leveled up, because I keep trying to go back and fight stuff, and I'm only getting like 2 sets respawning, you know, out of this whole big area I cleared out. I'm only getting 2 sets like respawning, and they're not giving me much XP. So, but you know, it all worked out in the end. I didn't really have a struggle throughout any of the battles or the boss battles. Maybe hard mode will probably do that to me, but I don't really care about playing in hard mode. That's just me personally. But the bosses were very fun and unique, and basically, I'd have to say that that's my only nitpick with the combat would be if they could figure out a way for people who like to level grind, give them an option. Now, maybe that could be more of the Colosseums, because there are 2 Colosseums where you can go into and fight waves of enemies over and over, and that gives you XP as well. Maybe that's kind of why they put those there for people like me who want to level grind. I did gain a couple of levels by doing that. Didn't seem like it did too much, but then again, maybe that's what's going to replace going back through sections of monsters to fight, because there are some missions that require you to go back through sections you've been through, side quests, to complete those, to talk to certain people and come back through. And maybe people don't want to have to battle stuff in between. I don't know. I don't know what their decision was for that. My thought is that it was probably along the lines of, we don't want you to have to feel like you have to grind a lot and take too much time having to grind, especially with new players not being familiar with RPGs. You know, that's one thing that's always been about RPGs. You know, you have to grind, but that's the one thing I hear about people who say they love to watch people play RPGs, and they say they would love to get into RPGs. They just don't feel like doing the grind. They don't want to spend the hours of grinding to get to certain levels to beat that boss that's overly powerful. So with that, it's kind of like a 50-50 nitpick, you know. I would like to have more battles. I'd like to do the level grind, but at the same time, I can kind of see why Square didn't do it. And it doesn't make the game boring. It doesn't water it down too much to where I'm like, this is too easy of a game. This is too whatever. This takes away from it. I feel like Square really found a perfect balance between basically what they've been looking for this whole time. I feel like Square has been trying to evolve Final Fantasy for the longest time, and they finally found the middle ground. They finally found that middle ground which makes it fun, but without taking away from it. So essentially my critique comes down to personal preference. This review has been long enough, I feel, at this point. I'm going to keep it here as a spoiler-free review, and I'm probably going to get into a spoiler rant review later of my thoughts on the differences in the story, because that is spoilers. And I feel like that even though I've got some concerns, it's only concerns from rose-tinted glasses of a nostalgic player who has played the original. And I don't feel like that takes away from my scoring of this game right now as it is. I'm a little worried about the future, but we'll get into that in spoilers, because I really think that you should play this game if you're a fan of RPGs, if you're a fan of action RPGs, if you're a fan of Final Fantasy in general, if you liked Final Fantasy 7, or if you didn't and you're looking to get into an RPG. This is a perfect blend of action and RPG that I feel like anybody can play, anybody can get into, and it's very, very fun. And if they keep this up for all the next upcoming games, I'm sold. Also, Square Enix, if anyone from Square Enix is listening to this, please continue this gameplay type to your other Final Fantasy games. If you took this combat style, and you applied it to all your other Final Fantasy games, I will buy them. Okay? I don't need you to try to reinvent Final Fantasy for like a 6th time for Final Fantasy 16 or whatever. Like, for real, you put this gameplay style, you do how you did Final Fantasy 7 Remake to Final Fantasy 16, I will buy it in a heartbeat. Now, with that being said, I hope that it's a longer game, a little bit of a longer game, because a typical regular Final Fantasy game should be a good lengthy title. I understand why this one's being split into parts, but like for Final Fantasy 16, give us this gameplay. I would love it. I would play the crap out of it, straight up. So, my rating on this spoiler-free review of Final Fantasy VII Remake, I give it a 9.5 out of 10. I normally don't do 0.5s or whatever. I would give it a solid 10 out of 10, but there's just those small little nitpicky things of where I wish there was a little bit more grinding. Still doesn't really take away from the game too much. And also some of the backgrounds looked like kind of fishbowl lens JPEGs. Once again, nitpicky. Sometimes the combat would be a little frustrating when you couldn't lock on to specific enemies, where you wanted to lock on to the main part of the enemy, but the enemy has like other like limbs or something you can also attack, and it would just float to whatever you were kind of looking at. Small little nitpicky things, not enough to really take away from the game, not enough that I feel like hinders the game, just enough to bring it down to 0.5. This would have been like a 10 out of 10. It brings it down like a 0.5. It's a 9.5 out of 10. Go buy this game. Go play this game. And when you do, let me know what you thought in the comment section down below. Please be aware that comment sections may be filled with spoilers. I can't really control that. So, if you haven't played the game and you wanted to stay spoiler free, just be wary of the comments section. But I'm curious to see what you think. If you've played the game or if you are going to play the game, come back and let me know what you thought. I'd really, really like to know. I can't wait to see more of this. I would love to see where they take this and also with the future of Final Fantasy. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you very, very much. I know I haven't been uploading much at all to YouTube. I'm going to try to do better about that. And I just had to come out with this review first because I just had to talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake. People should play this. I think that people really, really should play this. So once again, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm Crim for Stevens for the week. Catch me on Twitch. I'm playing games on Twitch, and yeah, I'll try to upload more when I can. Take care of each other. Stay safe. Wash your damn hands. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.